let's start like moving into this immersive
Yeah,
like
yeah,
setting
sure.
and talk about
Yeah.
like, I guess like let me. Well, you can answer that, but let me ask this here, and so it's setting up a little bit more. So obviously, immersive, I feel like is a bit of a weird term for what is actually happening, and I've heard you kind of say that too. Lots of people, L Acoustics has theirs, D&B has theirs.
Hmm.
Um, what's the other one? Whatever the other one is, no one
Oh
talks
yeah, I
about
mean, there's a handful.
it.
Um, yeah, I
um,
mean, I would say that for the most part, I would say D&B and L Acoustics and as of late, Fulcrum are the three primary um, manufacturers that are having more success in that market. Of course, there's a handful of others that also do it, and have been doing versions of it. But I would say, yeah, immersive is a difficult term, right?
yeah,
Because it's very it means different things to different people. But the way that I would describe it is there's basically um, there is there is several different technologies that make up what people call immersive.
yeah,
And one of them is object-based mixing, which I would argue is less immersive and more spatial audio, right? It's placing sources in different places depending on where you happen to have loudspeakers to reproduce those sources. And then the other primary technology would be called active acoustics or virtual acoustics. And that I would say is more of an immersive technology because it's creating an acoustic field that is coming you, a cohesive acoustic field that is coming from you, from
yeah.
all around you based on the loudspeakers that are placed around you. And so I would say the combination of the two technologies, object-based mixing and active acoustics, is what people would call immersive audio.
Okay. And that
So
makes that
so
makes
yeah,
more sense. So it's the container that those things live inside.
right, right. Yeah, absolutely.
Um, can I put you on the spot? Do you by chance happen to have a Fulcrum One file that's immersive that you could share and kind of we were on a call a while back with a client of mine,
Yeah.
and I felt like the explanation you gave about it was so good, um, and I kind of hope that like you could maybe share that and kind of show it because like it's one of those things like hearing it explained only kind of goes so far, and
Yeah.
it's like I've been a lot more involved and I've been to Infocom and I've been able to do a lot more, so it's like it's made more and more sense to me the more time has gone on, but
Yeah.
I feel like I run into the same question and the same like hurdles with most people is like they don't fully understand it.
Hmm.
Why do I need so many speakers? Why are you trying to do this? Why is that not going to be like 500 times the cost of the PA that we were originally talking about, or that I have in my head type thought process?
Yeah. And I would say I'm trying to find a project here really quick. I would say that uh, for the most part, immersive projects, at least in our world, usually live at about 25 to 30% more than a traditional solution. So not terribly expensive compared to a traditional solution. And of course, every room and every setup is going to be slightly different. Basically, in this particular environment, and this is, I would also say that we were toying around with a handful of different sub solutions. So
Yeah.
there's a lot more subs in this room than maybe will end up being deployed. But uh, and let's just say, hey, for kicks, we're gonna we're gonna just get rid of the subs so that they're not distracting from the conversation. So let's see here. Yeah, okay, that's easier to look at.
Yeah.
Um, okay, so in a traditional scenario, in a traditional design, you might have um, you might have a an LCR scenario where you have a left, center, right loudspeaker, um, or you might have a left and a right array hang and then outfills on the outside edges. And in this particular scenario, to make this more of an immersive room, we ended up doing four evenly spaced array hangs, or these are our new constant curvature boxes, across the front of the stage. So, for all intents and purposes, if you were planning on doing a traditional LCR scenario, all you're doing is adding one additional more hang, right? To make this an immersive system. Um, and and to give you a little bit of an idea how this benefits the listener when it comes to uh, the experience that they might have. Um, Actually, let me back up just a little bit here. Um, and I'm gonna stop sharing my screen really quick here. Okay,
Mhm.
so back to the immersive technologies and the way that they work, right? Right now, let's talk about object-based mixing. So object-based mixing is the idea of spatially placing sources, instruments or vocals or whatever it might be, in a space in a 3D spatial realm so that they can be reproduced back through your loudspeaker system.
Mhm.
And there's two primary ways that the different loudspeaker manufacturers do this. Two different primary approaches. One is a volume and panning based system, right? So they have the ability to basically use like a 3D panner to spatially pan something either left or right or further away from you, right? And that is all volume and panning based. The downfall to that particular approach is that it limits the rooms that might have the ability to have accessibility to an object-based mixing scenario, because um, your center loudspeaker has to cover the majority of the room. Just from a technical standpoint, you also need a lot more loudspeakers to be able to make that particular approach work well. Um, it's 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 a great approach. It just has certain benefits and certain limitations, as do the other ways that people approach it. The secondary way that loudspeaker manufacturers approach the object-based mixing is in a volume, panning, and delay approach. And so the idea is you're adding in that delay factor, which now helps you utilize more of your loudspeakers to reproduce the energy of a given source. Um, and so there is a few major players that utilize that technology, and there's a few players that utilize just the volume and the panning approach. All right, so now I'm going to go back and I'm going to share my screen. So, uh, in a volume and panning only scenario, right? If I place a source right here, it is going to be primarily projected through this loudspeaker and probably not through this loudspeaker over here, and probably very little through these two loudspeakers. And the reason is because it's right up on top of that one loudspeaker, right?
Mhm.
Um, the if you do the same thing in a volume, panning, and delay approach, this source right here is going to be projected through this loudspeaker, and this loudspeaker, and it's going to be perfectly timed based on its spatial position. Therefore, you're utilizing more of your loudspeakers to reproduce the energy of that particular source. Um, the benefit to that is if I'm sitting over here, I am going to be hearing a lead vocal that's placed on stage, probably primarily through this particular loudspeaker, but it's also going to come through this one a little bit to support the energy. And it's
Mm.
also going to come through this one a little bit to support the energy of that particular source. Um, but it is going to be delayed appropriately based on that position. So in a traditional loudspeaker setup, you might have, and we don't in this particular scenario, but you might have delay fill speakers halfway back. Or if you happen to have a balcony or an under balcony scenario, you're going to have delay fill speakers back there. And in a traditional loudspeaker setup, those delay fill speakers are going to be um, delayed in time back to your main loudspeakers, right? And the idea is that now the sources coming from your console are going to be projected through your loudspeaker system into the room in a cohesive fashion. In an object-based mixing scenario, we don't do that anymore, right? We tell the software exactly in an XYZ scenario where that loudspeaker is. So this loudspeaker is -7 off of its origin, which is the front and center of the stage. It's -18 off center, and it's 22 feet in the air. And once the software knows the exact position of every loudspeaker in the whole setup, so like it knows that that front fill is at this particular position and so on, it can now place the exact delay that it needs um, based on the position of the source, so the vocal, the kick drum, the electric guitar, and so on. And so now, if your electric guitar is placed over here, it is perfectly time aligned based on its spatial position to every loudspeaker in your whole system. And the same thing is true for your lead vocal that's placed here. It's perfectly time aligned to every um, loudspeaker in your system. Um, and the benefit to that is you increase your clarity massively because now the system is perfectly time aligned to every single source that you might happen to be putting through your loudspeaker system. And before, there's always going to be discrepancies because of time and space, and maybe you have to pick a central position where a loudspeaker is timed to, and that's going to be slightly different based on every single loudspeaker that's in your loudspeaker system. Um, I'm going to quickly give you a little bit of an example of what it looks like to, and I'm creating this really quickly on the fly here, but what it would look like to create a mixing surface for an object-based mixing scenario. So I'm going to create my sources over here. I'm going to maybe select them and color them. We'll create a few that are purple,
And when you
a
and
few
you
that are red.
when you're
Go
saying
ahead.
creating objects, like you're talking about like a drum set, a guitar player.
Exactly.
Yeah, yeah.
Yep. So this could be my kick, and this could be my snare, and this could be my acoustic guitar, and this could be my lead vocal or whatever.
Mhm.
Um, and then when I take these sources, I can just literally grab this place button and drop them on the source, or drop them on my mixing surface. And so now, once I've done that, um, and I'll show you in just a second here, um, if we go back over to my design tab here, you can now see that those sources are placed on my stage, and I could even bring, um, I could bring that elevation up a little bit so that it's closer to the elevation um, of where those microphones or sources might happen to be. Now, mind you, in this particular scenario, it's a 2D mixing scenario because I don't have overhead loudspeakers. I'm not trying to place my bass guitar in the back
Mhm.
corner of the room or whatever. This is very much a spatial audio kind of positioning based on more of a house of worship band setup. Um, so now I've got my lead vocal up here, and you can kind of see where it's placed. And I've got my snare drum back here, and my kick drum back here, and my acoustic guitar over here. And say, for instance, I want my acoustic guitar is actually being played by my worship leader who's also singing. I can bring this right up next to him, and now for every person in the congregation, the perception is now that that acoustic guitar and that vocal are coming from the same place, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's being appropriately delayed in time through the loudspeaker system so that the perception from every seat in the house is that that source is coming from that location, um, which is so incredibly cool because now
Yeah.
we're pairing what we're visually seeing in a worship environment to what
Right.
we're hearing. Um, the other benefit is that from a mixing standpoint, I no longer have to decide, oh man, my acoustic guitar is interfering with my lead vocals, so now I have to carve out a little bit of high frequencies to let my lead vocal sit. I'm just like, oh, I'm going to scooch it back over here a little bit. And now it is spatially coming out of my loudspeakers at a
Mm.
different time from my lead vocal. I mean, and we're
Yeah.
talking milliseconds here, but it makes a massive difference on your loudspeaker's ability to reproduce those frequencies. And now you can leave the full frequency spectrum of uh, an acoustic guitar or an electric guitar or whatever it might be, um, without destructively having to EQ it to make space for a lead vocal or whatever else it might be. And this is our 3D view, but from a mixing standpoint on a Sunday morning, I'm going to live in this live view, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
just a 2D overhead view. I know this is my stage. Um,
Well,
and I know that,
and for
like,
most churches, they don't even have to look at this. Like if they're not moving their stuff around, drums are always in the same spot.
absolutely,
Bass player sits in the same
absolutely.
spot. That gets set, and then you don't touch it if you don't need to.
Right. And I would say, for the most part, house of worship setups, the very first time they set up their maybe stage layout right after Christmas, um, they'll open up the software, they'll move the sources around based on where they want them to spatially be, and based on where um, it might happen to be on stage visually. And then they're going to close the software out, and they're not going to touch it until they rearrange the stage at Easter.
Mm-hmm.
And then they're opening up the software, they're moving things around slightly, and then they're closing out the software again, and they're just mixing on the console like they normally would. But now they have um, higher fidelity, higher clarity in their system. They have to EQ a lot less. They can EQ from a lot more of a musical standpoint than a technical standpoint. And truthfully, that opens up the door for a lot of volunteer mixers
I was
who
just
might
gonna
be
say.
musical but not technical to be able to have a lot more success behind the console than they would have previously, because now they can think about, oh man, that electric guitar is a little bright, and I'm going to approach it exactly the same way I would in my car. If
Right.
I was listening and something was too bright, I'm going to grab the high frequency EQ and I'm going to turn it down a little bit, right? And they can do that now. And know that their EQ is no longer affecting all the other sources
Mm.
like it would be if it was coming out of the stereo bus of their console.
Right. Yeah,
Um,
I was just say, like, is this going to make this easier for our untrained volunteers? Are we going to be able to grab random people out of the pews and put them behind the console easier with this, and get a better
I
result?
I think as long as those people are musical in nature,
Okay.
absolutely. I mean, I think that there still has to be, if we're trying to mix music, you have to be, as a human being, you have to be inherently musical, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, I when I was at Highlands, I had a guy who uh, was super technical, but just didn't have a musical ear, and he knew how to make things work. And so we ended up putting him at a campus, a portable campus, set up, tear down. They would load in and load out every Sunday morning, and he could hook everything up and make everything work, but he just didn't have a musical ear.
Yeah.
And so we paired him with um, a guy who wasn't very technical, but had a musical ear that could EQ and push faders. And like the pair of them created an incredible worship experience for people because each of them had their own strengths. And so I would say this is going to give you the ability to pull your bass player off stage who might not be playing bass on a given Sunday, but might be curious about mixing.
Yeah.
And they're going to have a lot more success because they're musical, right? And they can push faders musically and they can EQ musically, but they might not have the years and years of technical experience to understand that if I EQ this way, it's going to affect this differently, and so on. I guess that's a long way of saying yes. It will make it easier,
No, that's
more
good.
accessible.
No, that's great.
So, and
So
then I would also say, oh, go ahead.
no, go ahead. No, I was going to transition to something different, but go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, if you happen to have a really technical mixer and you want to create an awesome experience for, I don't know, a Christmas service where you have stage designs and set changes and blah, 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 we also have a built-in sequence and cue-based automation system
Yeah, yeah.
that you can deploy to rearrange your stage based on what's happening musically, and and let's see here, and I'll
And you said that there's a Stream Deck control for this as well.
well, we have a MIDI based control. We are accessible to be controlled via MIDI cues and also OSC command.
Okay.
So if you have an Allen and Heath Avantis console, like we do up at the factory with in our immersive demo space there, I have my snapshots on the console, recalling cues for individual songs. And in that scenario, we're recalling a jam band for one and then a string section for the next one. So those sources are moving around quite a bit. But I can even set my fade times. Let's see here. And
But
then maybe
for churches that are doing plays during like Christmas time or Easter time,
absolutely
going between worship band and performance, back and forth.
And it gives you the ability to then say, hey, like I've got my Stream Deck set up to cue my lighting console and my snapshot on my audio console. And then it's also controlling this so that when you fire your snapshot on your console, you're now moving your sources. And I could, let's see here.
Yeah, you can delay them.
Yeah, I can set up a follow trigger on these guys. And I could even set up a delay so that this guy is, let's see here. This guy is going to delay for 2 seconds before it fires. So when I fire this first snapshot, it's going to go instantaneously because there's no fade, there's no delay. But once this one finishes, this Q2 is going to follow. It's going to be on a 2-second fade time. And then Q3 is going to wait for 2 seconds before it fires its 3-second fade time. So if I fire this, it's going to slowly but surely go, and now it's going to be in that holding pattern until it goes, and it's going to move to my next position. And this is super, super handy when it comes to creating really interactive musicals for Christmas or Easter, or whatever it might be, whatever you can do creatively. And I mean, you don't have to use it, right? It's just there if you happen to want to.
Yeah. Yeah, and I know we've talked about a lot of different options with, like, you know, there's some third-party hardware and software that you can put on Pastor, so as he walks around, it'll track him and stuff like that to, you know, always make that feel right, which is cool.
Yeah, we have our integration with Black Tracks, which is it's a infrared belt tracking system that will track performers or pastors or whatever around the stage. I would say the jury's still out on whether that is beneficial in the message portion of the service. Some people love it. Some people think it's a little distracting. So yeah. And also, normally I show my source labels so you can see what things are and so on.
So I want to move into another portion of the immersive conversation. I think that there's a lot to this portion, so I think I'm just going to kind of like preemptively like say a bunch of things right now and then let you kind of respond to it. So I've heard a lot of people say that this is the future. And you were recently on the Churchfront podcast, and you had made a comment about and you can talk about the comment that you made about the 43-inch TV and how expensive it used to be. And they made a comment at the end when they were kind of wrapping up to kind of summarize that I feel like I wanted to push back on and talk to you about, because it was your
Hmm.
comment. They were like, yeah, like the cost is it's high, but like it'll come down eventually. I've never really seen Pro AV come down in cost. And most of what I've seen over my lifetime, this is kind of like, let me throw it out there to you. You throw it back if you feel like I'm
Hmm.
wrong here.
Yeah.
Is like, you made a comment about when you were growing up and getting into audio, you had one speaker in the center of the room.
Hmm.
I grew up with two speakers. And now my kids are growing up with two hangs of 8 speakers. And so the cost of, like, we went from one speaker to 16, and some of these bigger churches are even more than that.
Right,
Um,
right.
Amplification channels go up on that, the amount of boxes, which means, so the cost of Pro AV, specifically if we just narrow it down to speaker systems,
Hmm.
has gone up and gone up and gone up and gone up. An affordable level, maybe per box isn't as expensive. Maybe like there's that, but like when we're talking about immersive, I get that this feels like the next rendition of that mono speaker to stereo to line array. Like,
Hmm.
it feels like object based mixing is now like that next like rendition of like, we're sculpting our audio experience and what will become the new normal. That feels like that's the next step. Am I wrong for
Sure.
feeling like that? And can you kind of talk? I like I said a couple things there. If you want to kind of start talking to it
Yeah.
all, that would be great.
So I think from the yeah, my comment was that back in 2012, I bought a flat screen TV. It actually wasn't flat; it was one of those Samsung Curve TVs. Anyways, I think I spent like $600 on it or something like that. But at the time, um, the 4K TVs had just come out, and they were like 8 grand or something like that for like a 40-inch TV. And my thought, just to myself, was that is insane. No one will ever spend that. Like, it's just, that'll never become practical, right? And now I can go out to Walmart and I can buy a 40-inch TV that's 4K for like $189 or whatever, maybe even less. And my point was that 6, 8 years ago, immersive audio, object-based mixing was brought to the market, and we were told, man, this is only for the elite, right?
Yeah.
This is for the people that have like $3 million to spend on a PA. Um,
You're seeing it
and
like Disney World and stuff like that.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, this is for Broadway. This is for
Yeah.
like big Broadway shows and like no one else. And so my point was that, hey, it is now accessible, right?
Yeah.
Like it still might be more than a traditional sound system,
Yeah.
depending on your setup and depending on the environment. But like that doesn't mean that it's out of reach anymore, right?
Right.
Um, so I would say in that way, it has come down in cost, right? But I don't see it coming down in cost more in the future.
Yeah.
I think it will probably live at about that 30-ish% increase to a traditional stereo PA system, depending on what you happen to want for your particular environment. Um, but I agree with you. Like pro audio is not getting less expensive as the days go on. Um, but I think that technology that was so expensive is now less expensive, right?
Right.
So
Yeah.
like if I wanted to buy a really awesome line array 5 years ago that had just come out, like I can probably now buy that particular line array for less money than when it first came out.
Yeah.
And therefore it's going to be less expensive than the technology that came out right now. But like if I want to buy what's coming out right now, it's not going to be less expensive than that line array that was brand new 5 years ago. So
Right.
I think it's a both and thing, you know?
Right.
But my point was that immersive audio, object-based mixing, active acoustics, it is accessible now. Um, and people should consider it. I think it is where audio is going, and I guess I'm here to say, like, it is the new frontier. It is the next thing. It
Yeah.
is us going from mono to stereo.
Yeah.
Um, so
And I will
I don't
tell
know if
I
I touched on all of your answers or whatever,
no,
but
you totally
yeah.
did. I mean, I will tell you, like, I've heard a bunch. Your room at Infocom this past year in 2025 was probably the
Hmm.
most like dialed in I think I've heard the system with that, and some of that was because of the new products you guys had out that you were demoing
Yeah,
those
yeah.
as well. So it was kind of like a double whammy. Because that CC box, man, you said is your favorite box mixing right now. I will tell you, I'm still raving about it. And one was Infocom
Yeah.
like 6 months ago. Um, yeah, super excited about it, and I think it's worth the investment. You know, it's that idea of, like you said, mono to stereo, and then like I said, even to to a line array system, is like, could we cover a space with some really big point source speakers? Well, yeah,
Hmm.
we could. Is that the type of audio forming and coverage that we want? Well, maybe not. That's why line arrays exist, right? Because they
Hmm.
give us that type of control. And then we live into these new worlds now where with object based mixing, like, what kind of control do we want, right? It's kind of just adding in. And I feel like comparing it to like cars is probably better than it is like to technology, because it's like, you know, a Suburban 10 years ago cost less than it does now, but
Right.
there's also 7 versions of a Suburban you can get. And do you want heated seats? Do you want a heated steering
Hmm.
wheel? Do you want, you know what I'm saying? Like, you have all these features that make
Yeah.
things more controllable and ease of use, and the experience is different,
Hmm.
in, Yukon Denali versus like an SLE, right? Both still great vehicles, both do a lot of things, but like, that's kind of the way I kind of see this a little bit
Yeah.
more.
Yeah. I mean, and to the point that I just made, like, if you wanted to buy that 10-year-old Suburban right now, it would be less expensive than when it came out 10
Right.
years ago,
Yeah,
right?
exactly. Yeah.
So.